December 1944. A woman is standing inside a German prison cell, listening to the footsteps of the guards outside. She has been captured. The people who arrested her believe they have finally caught a dangerous Allied agent. They are wrong about one thing. They don't understand just how valuable she is. Because this woman has already survived missions across occupied Europe, crossed enemy borders, carried intelligence through Nazi territory, and talked her way out of situations that should have ended with a firing squad. Now she is facing the one thing every secret agent fears: interrogation. The Germans want names. They want locations. They want to know who she works for. And most importantly, they want to know how deeply she has penetrated their operations. But instead of giving them what they want, she begins doing something far more dangerous. She starts manipulating them. Not with a weapon, not with physical strength, with information, with fear, with a story carefully designed to make her captors believe that releasing her could actually serve German interests. It sounds impossible, but this isn't the first time she has survived by turning an enemy's assumptions against them. Years earlier, she had crossed borders under false identities. She had carried secret messages through occupied territory. She had worked with resistance fighters who knew that discovery could mean torture or execution. And somewhere along the way, British intelligence had discovered something extraordinary about her. She was exceptionally difficult to intimidate. Her real advantage wasn't that she was invisible. It was that people consistently underestimated her. To the enemy, she could look like an ordinary European woman. To her allies, she was something else entirely. A courier, a saboteur, a negotiator, a spy, and sometimes, when everything went wrong, the person who had to rescue everyone else. But the woman in that cell has no idea whether her latest gamble will work. One wrong sentence could expose her. One suspicious guard could end the game. One name could send an entire resistance network to its grave. Then the footsteps stop outside her door. The lock begins to turn, and the woman prepares to make one of the most dangerous decisions of her life. Her name is Christine Granville, and this is the story of the woman who repeatedly walked into Nazi-controlled Europe and somehow kept walking back out. The lock turns. Christine does not move. The heavy German door opens, and two guards appear in the corridor. For a fraction of a second, she has no idea what comes next. Then one of them gestures for her to follow. Christine steps outside. She knows that the Germans believe they have the advantage. They have the prison. They have the weapons. They have the interrogation rooms. And they believe the woman walking between them is trapped. But Christine has spent years learning something that has nothing to do with weapons. People rarely see what they expect to see. That lesson had served her long before the prison cell. Born Maria Krystyna Janina Skarbek in Warsaw in 1908, she had grown up in a wealthy Polish family. Her life before the war belonged to a completely different world from the one she would eventually enter. She traveled. She spoke languages. She was comfortable moving between different European societies. But when Germany invaded Poland in 1939, that world collapsed. Christine did not respond by waiting for someone else to decide what she should do. She went toward the danger. Her first wartime journeys took her across Europe, eventually bringing her into British intelligence work. Britain was looking for people who could operate where conventional soldiers could not. People who could cross borders. People who could communicate with resistance movements. People who could survive without the protection of a uniform. Christine was unusually suited to that world. She could speak to aristocrats. She could speak to ordinary civilians. She could move through dangerous environments without immediately attracting attention. And she had something intelligence officers could not manufacture in a training school: instinct. But instinct alone would not keep her alive. Her missions became increasingly dangerous. She carried information across borders and helped establish links between Allied intelligence and resistance networks. She operated in places where the enemy controlled the streets and where a suspicious question could become an accusation. Then came one of the moments that demonstrated exactly what made her different. During one mission, German authorities became suspicious. The consequences could have been catastrophic. Christine had every reason to panic. Instead, she created an alternative explanation. She convinced the Germans that she was suffering from tuberculosis. It was an extraordinary gamble. A disease could explain her appearance. It could explain why she needed freedom of movement. And, more importantly, it could make the Germans believe that keeping her was dangerous. The plan worked. She walked away. But every escape had a price. The more successful Christine became, the more valuable she was to British intelligence. And that meant the missions became harder. By 1944, the war had entered a brutal final phase. Germany was beginning to lose ground, but that did not make occupied Europe safer. In many places, it made the fighting more desperate. Resistance groups were preparing for the possibility of Allied advances. British intelligence needed people who could organize, communicate, and influence fighters on the ground. Christine was sent into one of the most dangerous environments of the war, France. There, she worked alongside resistance fighters and Allied agents, helping organize operations against German forces. She moved through a country where the enemy could appear almost anywhere. A roadblock, a railway station, a village patrol, a sudden search. Every journey carried the possibility of capture. Yet Christine kept moving. She was not simply carrying messages anymore. She was helping connect people who were preparing to fight. And then the situation changed again. The Germans began tightening their grip. Arrests increased. Networks were being hunted. People disappeared. Some resistance groups were betrayed from within. Christine understood the terrifying mathematics of clandestine warfare. Every additional person in a network meant another possible leak. Every successful operation created evidence that someone might eventually trace. The closer the Allies came to victory, the more desperate the enemy became. And Christine was now operating inside a world where one mistake could destroy everything she had helped build. Then came another mission, another crossing, another journey through territory controlled by men who were looking for people exactly like her. She went anyway, because by this point, turning back was no longer simply a personal decision. Other people were depending on her. Resistance fighters, Allied agents, people carrying information, people waiting for instructions, and people who might never survive if the network collapsed. Christine understood the risk. She continued, until one day, the woman who had escaped danger so many times finally found herself in the hands of the enemy. The prison cell from the Hook was not the beginning of her story. It was the moment when everything she had learned was about to be tested. The Germans wanted answers. Christine needed them to believe they already knew enough. Because if she could control what they believed, she might still control what happened next. And that was the skill that had kept her alive for years. Now she would have to use it one more time. The Germans want answers. Christine gives them a story, not the truth, not even a convincing version of the truth. Something more useful, something they might actually believe. She understands that interrogation is not simply about what a prisoner says. It is about what the interrogator wants to hear. So she watches them, their questions, their reactions, the moments when they become impatient, the moments when they hesitate. Christine has survived because she knows how to read people. Now she has to read the men sitting across from her. But this is not the first time she has been forced to gamble with her life. Long before this interrogation room, she had learned that the safest escape was sometimes to make the enemy believe that letting you go was their own idea. And that instinct had made her extraordinarily valuable to British intelligence. Her missions had taken her through countries where the difference between freedom and imprisonment could be a single document, a single checkpoint, or a single suspicious glance. She had carried messages. She had crossed borders. She had worked with resistance networks. But her greatest contribution was often less visible. She connected people. A resistance fighter in one town could become part of a much larger operation because someone like Christine carried information between them. That made her useful. It also made her dangerous. Because the Germans knew that Allied intelligence depended on people moving quietly through occupied Europe. They were hunting couriers. They were hunting radio operators. They were hunting anyone who could connect one isolated resistance group to another. And Christine was exactly that kind of person. Her reputation inside British intelligence grew. But reputation was a dangerous thing in espionage. The more valuable an agent became, the more dangerous the missions became. Then France became her battlefield. By 1944, the Allied invasion had transformed the strategic situation. The German occupation was under enormous pressure. Resistance groups were becoming increasingly active. British agents were helping organize sabotage, communications, and armed resistance. Christine was sent into the region where these operations were unfolding. She arrived not as a conventional soldier, but as an organizer and intelligence operative. She had to help people who were already living under constant threat. Weapons needed to move. Messages needed to travel. Information needed to reach Allied commanders. And people needed to know when to act. But the resistance was not a single unified army. It was a collection of groups, personalities, and loyalties. Some fighters trusted the British. Some trusted local commanders. Some trusted almost nobody. Christine had to navigate all of them. One careless alliance could compromise an entire operation. Then there was the problem of German retaliation. When resistance attacks increased, German forces often responded with arrests and executions. Villages could be searched. Hostages could be taken. Suspected collaborators could be interrogated. The psychological pressure was enormous. Christine knew that every operation had consequences beyond the immediate objective. A successful mission could save lives. A failed one could destroy them. And then came the moment when the network needed someone willing to take an even greater risk. Christine stepped forward. She moved between resistance groups, helping coordinate their activities and encouraging cooperation. Her authority did not come from rank. It came from results. People listened because she had already survived situations that would have broken most agents. But now the Germans were closing in. The war was entering its final and most violent phase. The enemy knew the Allies were coming. The resistance knew it too. Everyone was preparing for the collapse of German control. And that created a strange paradox. The closer victory came, the more dangerous the underground became. German security forces had less reason to show restraint. Captured agents could expect brutal treatment. There was little incentive for the occupiers to negotiate. Christine continued anyway. Then something happened that would change everything. She was captured. The woman who had crossed borders, escaped danger, and survived years of clandestine warfare was suddenly sitting in a German interrogation room. The Germans believed they finally had something valuable. An Allied agent. Someone who could reveal names, locations, networks, operations. But Christine knew something they did not. They had captured her body. They had not captured the truth. And now she had to decide exactly how much of a lie they were willing to believe. She looked across the table. The interrogation continued. And Christine began playing the most dangerous game of her life. Because if the Germans accepted her story, she might walk out alive. If they rejected it, there might be no second chance. Christine keeps her eyes on the officer across the table. She knows that the next few minutes matter. The Germans are no longer simply asking questions. They are testing her. Every pause, every hesitation, every change in expression. They are looking for a contradiction. Christine gives them none. Instead, she allows them to believe that they have misunderstood the importance of the woman sitting before them. That is the opening she needs. Her story is carefully constructed around what the Germans already fear. The Allied advance. The growing strength of the resistance. The possibility that people inside their own system may already be compromised. Christine understands that fear can be more powerful than evidence. If she can make her captors believe that she is connected to something larger than they understand, they may become afraid of what could happen if they treat her incorrectly. It is a dangerous calculation. But Christine has made dangerous calculations before. Her entire wartime career has depended on understanding the difference between what an enemy knows and what an enemy thinks it knows. That distinction can save a life, or destroy one. The interrogation continues. The officers question her about her movements, about people she has met, about organizations. Christine carefully avoids giving them information that could endanger anyone else. But she also understands that complete silence could be just as suspicious as a confession. So she speaks. Enough to maintain the illusion. Never enough to expose the network. The room becomes a battle of patience. The Germans want certainty. Christine gives them uncertainty. And uncertainty is exactly what she needs. Outside the interrogation room, the war is moving toward its final months. The Allied armies are advancing. German forces are under enormous pressure. But victory has not yet arrived. Thousands of people are still trapped behind enemy lines. Resistance fighters are still being hunted. Agents are still disappearing. Christine's own journey has already taken her through some of the most dangerous territory in Europe. And she has survived partly because she refuses to think like a conventional soldier. She understands that espionage is not about winning every confrontation. Sometimes it is about avoiding confrontation completely. Sometimes it is about making an enemy look in the wrong direction. And sometimes it is about convincing someone that you are less dangerous than you really are. That principle had served her in Poland. It had served her across Europe. And now she is using it inside a German interrogation room. But there is another problem. Christine cannot remain imprisoned forever. Even if the Germans believe her story, eventually someone may ask another question. Another officer may notice an inconsistency. Another prisoner may reveal something. A document may appear. A name may surface. The entire deception could collapse in seconds. She needs more than a convincing story. She needs a reason for the Germans to release her. And that is where the gamble becomes extraordinary. Christine attempts to persuade her captors that she can be useful to them. Not as a prisoner, as someone with information. It is a dangerous psychological reversal. The prisoner is trying to make the jailer believe that freedom could be more valuable than confinement. For the Germans, the calculation is suddenly different. If she is telling the truth, keeping her locked away may mean losing access to information. If she is lying, releasing her could be catastrophic. They have to decide which possibility frightens them more. Christine waits. The officers confer. She watches. She says nothing. Then, gradually, the atmosphere changes. The interrogation becomes less aggressive. The questions become more cautious. Something has shifted. Christine may have found the weakness she was looking for. But surviving captivity is only the beginning. Because outside that room, people are still fighting. And if Christine walks free, she will have to return to the same world that nearly killed her. The resistance is still operating. The Germans are still searching. And the war is approaching its final confrontation. Christine knows that freedom will not mean safety. It will simply mean another mission, another journey, another opportunity for the enemy to find her. Then the decision is made. The Germans are prepared to let her go. For the first time since her capture, Christine stands. The door opens. She walks into the corridor. And behind her, the men who questioned her still do not fully understand what has happened. They believe they have released someone who might be useful. They do not realize that they may have just allowed an Allied operative to walk back into the war. Christine steps outside. The air is cold. The streets are tense. But she is free. For now. And the war is not finished with her yet. The street is quiet. Too quiet. Christine walks without looking back. She knows better than to celebrate. Freedom in occupied Europe is never absolute. A person can leave a prison and still be followed. A checkpoint can appear around the next corner. A familiar face can suddenly become an informer. And the people Christine has worked with are still in danger. So she keeps moving. Her first priority is finding the resistance again. The war has changed dramatically, but the underground networks have not suddenly become safe. German forces are retreating in some areas. In others, they are fighting harder than ever. The resistance now faces a new challenge. How do you move from surviving the occupation to helping defeat it? Christine is exactly the kind of person needed for that transition. She understands communications. She understands people. And she understands what happens when different groups fail to trust one another. Her experience has taught her that a resistance network cannot depend on courage alone. It needs organization. It needs discipline. And it needs people who can make decisions when there is no time to wait for instructions from London. Christine returns to the field. Her work becomes increasingly connected with resistance fighters preparing for the final phase of the war. The atmosphere is different now. There is hope, but there is also desperation. Everyone knows Germany is losing. That knowledge makes the remaining German forces unpredictable. Retreating armies can still destroy villages. Captured resistance fighters can still be executed. And anyone suspected of helping the Allies remains in danger. Christine moves through this unstable landscape with the same controlled confidence that has protected her for years. She does not behave like someone waiting for rescue. She behaves like someone preparing for the next operation. Her ability to communicate becomes especially important. The resistance needs coordination. Information has to move quickly. German positions need to be understood. Allied movements need to be communicated. And local fighters need to know when an opportunity has appeared. The underground war is becoming a conventional war. But the transition is messy. Some resistance fighters want immediate action. Others fear German retaliation. Some groups cooperate. Others compete. Christine has to navigate these tensions while the battlefield itself is changing around them. Then comes one of the most dangerous assignments. The resistance needs someone who can help organize fighters in a region where German forces are still present. Christine accepts. She moves deeper into the countryside. Roads are crowded with military traffic. Villages are filled with rumors. Allied aircraft appear overhead. German units begin pulling back. But retreat does not mean surrender. It means uncertainty. And uncertainty creates opportunities. Resistance fighters begin preparing attacks on communications and transportation. The objective is not simply to kill soldiers. It is to slow the German withdrawal. Every damaged railway, every disrupted road, every intercepted message can make a difference. Christine helps coordinate these efforts. She is no longer merely carrying information between isolated people. She is becoming part of the machinery directing the resistance. And this is where her reputation becomes important. People trust her judgment. She has survived. She has returned from missions that should have ended differently. And she understands the cost of careless decisions. But there is something Christine cannot control. The war is approaching its end. Soon, the secret world that gave her purpose will begin disappearing. The agents will return home. The resistance fighters will have to decide what comes next. The underground identities that protected people during the occupation will become unnecessary. But before that happens, there is still work to do. Christine receives another assignment. This time, the danger comes not from a prison cell, but from the battlefield itself. She enters a region where German forces are still capable of fighting. And there, she discovers that the final days of the war may be more dangerous than the beginning. Because when an empire is collapsing, nobody knows exactly what its soldiers will do next. Christine keeps moving. The war is almost over. But her most important mission may still be ahead. The road ahead disappears into the morning mist. Christine walks toward it. She knows that the war is changing. But changing does not mean finished. German units are still capable of fighting. Resistance fighters are still operating in dangerous territory. And the people around Christine still need information. Her new mission takes her deeper into the unstable final phase of the occupation. The old rules are beginning to disappear. German authority is weakening. Allied forces are advancing. And across France, resistance groups are emerging from hiding. But nobody knows exactly how long the transition will take. Christine does not wait for certainty. She moves. Her experience has taught her that the most dangerous moment is often the moment when everyone believes the danger is almost over. A checkpoint that once seemed permanent can suddenly disappear. A road that was safe yesterday can become dangerous today. And a German unit that appears to be retreating can still turn around and attack. Christine works with resistance fighters who are preparing for the final confrontation. Their objectives are becoming more ambitious. They are no longer simply trying to survive. They are trying to help destroy the enemy's ability to continue fighting. Communications become critical. Transportation becomes critical. Information becomes critical. Christine helps coordinate people who may have never met before. She has to make them trust one another quickly. There is no time for lengthy introductions. No time for hesitation. The Allied advance is creating opportunities everywhere. But it is also creating confusion. German commanders are trying to maintain control. Resistance groups are trying to exploit weaknesses. Allied forces are moving forward. And civilians are caught between them. Christine understands that the resistance must act carefully. A badly planned operation could bring German retaliation against an entire village. So every decision carries consequences. One evening, Christine sits with several resistance fighters inside a dimly lit room. A map lies open on the table. They discuss German movements, roads, railways, communications. The room is quiet. Nobody speaks casually. Everyone understands what is at stake. Christine studies the map. She has spent years moving through Europe with pieces of information that could change the fate of other people. Now she is helping decide where those pieces fit together. The operation begins. Resistance fighters move through the darkness. Christine remains close enough to coordinate, but far enough from the immediate danger to keep communication moving. Then something goes wrong. German forces appear sooner than expected. The resistance group has seconds to react. There is no perfect solution. They can continue and risk being surrounded, or retreat and lose the opportunity. Christine has faced impossible choices before. She makes the decision. They pull back. It is not a failure. It is survival. A successful resistance leader knows that courage without judgment can become recklessness. Christine understands the difference. But the mission has revealed something important. The Germans are losing control faster than expected. Their movements are becoming disorganized. Their ability to respond is weakening. For the first time, Christine can see the end of the occupation approaching. But there is another realization. When the war ends, the world that created her will disappear. The secret codes, the safe houses, the hidden radios, the false identities. The people who could not tell anyone where they had been. All of it will eventually become history. Christine has spent years living inside a secret world. Soon she will have to leave it. But she is not finished yet. The Allied advance continues. Resistance groups rise openly. German forces retreat. And Christine keeps working until the very end. Then comes the moment she has been waiting for. The sound of war begins to change. The fear that once filled every street starts to weaken. The occupation is collapsing. After years of uncertainty, Europe is finally approaching liberation. Christine has survived. But survival is not the same as coming home unchanged. She has seen people disappear. She has watched friends take impossible risks. She has carried secrets that could never be spoken. And now she must face a question that no intelligence officer can answer for her. What does a spy become when the war is over? Christine will soon discover that escaping the enemy was only one part of her story. The harder part may be discovering what remains when the mission ends. The fighting is fading. But for Christine, peace does not arrive all at once. For years, she has lived according to a different set of rules. Never reveal too much. Never trust too quickly. Always have another route. Always know what you will do if the first plan fails. Now those rules are becoming unnecessary. Europe is emerging from the war. The secret networks are beginning to disappear. The radios fall silent. The coded messages stop. The safe houses no longer need to remain hidden. And the people who spent years pretending to be someone else can finally begin returning to ordinary life. Christine has survived something few people could fully understand. She has crossed borders under false identities. She has carried intelligence through occupied territory. She has worked with resistance fighters. She has been hunted. She has been captured. And she has walked out alive. But the end of the war raises a difficult question. What happens to someone who has spent years living for a mission when the mission no longer exists? Christine returns to Britain. For the British intelligence world, she is no longer simply an agent. She is a remarkable survivor. Her wartime service is recognized. She receives the George Medal from Britain. France also recognizes her contribution. She is awarded the Croix de Guerre. Poland honors her as well. On paper, these medals tell a simple story: courage, service, bravery. But medals cannot explain what espionage actually costs. They cannot describe the years of uncertainty. They cannot show the faces of people who did not survive. They cannot erase the memories of the missions. And they cannot easily turn a secret agent back into an ordinary civilian. Christine has survived the war. But peace does not give her the life she might have expected. The woman who once moved across Europe under false identities now has to exist in a world where there are no longer enemy checkpoints to avoid. No hidden messages to carry. No resistance fighters waiting for instructions. No reason to disappear. Yet she remains restless. Perhaps that is what happens when danger becomes normal. Perhaps ordinary life feels strange after years of extraordinary responsibility. Christine tries to move forward. But the post-war world is changing quickly. The political landscape of Europe is becoming more complicated. The old alliances are shifting. The people who fought together against Nazi Germany do not necessarily agree about what Europe should become next. And for Christine, Poland remains deeply important. She had fought for a free Poland. But the Poland that emerges after the war is not the Poland she had imagined. The political reality is changing. The country falls under Soviet influence. The victory she had fought for has become more complicated. For someone who spent years fighting against occupation, that must have been a painful realization. Yet Christine keeps moving. She works. She travels. She tries to build a life outside espionage. But the world that once depended on her courage has little idea how to give her a place within it. And then, years after the war, something happens that makes the ending of her story far darker than anyone could have expected. Christine Granville is murdered in Britain in 1952. She is only 44 years old. The woman who survived Nazi-controlled Europe does not die in a battlefield. She does not die during a secret mission. She does not disappear behind enemy lines. She dies in peacetime, a shocking end to a life that had seemed almost impossible to destroy. Her wartime story had been filled with escapes, with danger, with impossible decisions. Again and again, she had found a way through. But there was no escape this time. Christine Granville's life leaves behind a strange contradiction. She became one of Britain's most courageous female agents during the Second World War. She received honors from several countries. She helped resistance networks survive. She repeatedly placed herself in situations where capture could mean death. And yet, for years, much of the wider world knew almost nothing about her. Her story was buried beneath secrecy. That was the nature of the work. The best agents often leave behind the fewest obvious traces. Christine's greatest achievement may never have been fully visible. She helped people communicate when communication itself could be fatal. She helped resistance fighters continue when the odds were against them. She survived captivity through extraordinary psychological courage. And she kept moving when stopping would have been easier. Today, the image of the glamorous spy can make espionage look almost romantic. Christine's story tells a different truth. There was nothing glamorous about being hunted. Nothing glamorous about knowing that one mistake could kill another person. Nothing glamorous about carrying secrets that could never safely be shared. Her real weapon was adaptability. Her ability to read people. Her courage under pressure. And her refusal to accept that an impossible situation necessarily meant defeat. The woman who once walked into occupied Europe as a secret agent eventually became part of its hidden history. Her name was Christine Granville. And perhaps the most remarkable thing about her story is not that she survived one dangerous mission. It is that she kept surviving the next one. Until eventually, the war ended. The secret networks disappeared. The uniforms were put away. The radios went silent. And the woman who had spent years fighting in the shadows was finally left with something she had rarely been given during wartime. A future. Her legacy remains a reminder that history is not only shaped by generals and armies. Sometimes it is shaped by a single person moving quietly through the darkness, carrying information, taking a risk, and refusing to give up. If stories of courage, sacrifice, and extraordinary women from history inspire you, subscribe to Her Silent Strength. Here, we uncover the remarkable lives of women who faced danger, betrayal, war, and impossible choices, often without recognition. Subscribe to Her Silent Strength, because some of history's greatest stories were never meant to be forgotten.